morning. I'm Mayor Tommy Roberts. Welcome back to the Mayor's Table. My guest this morning is Kevin Burns, who is Sergeant with the San Juan County Sheriff's Office, and he also serves as the Director of the Region 2 Narcotics Task Force. Kevin, welcome this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin, I am a member of the Board of Directors of San Juan Safe Communities Initiative, and so almost every month I get to hear a report about the activities of the Narcotics Task Force, Region 2. And I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to have you as a guest this morning to talk about the organization and to educate our citizens a little bit about what you do. So I want to start out just asking you, what is the mission of the Narcotics Task Force?
In short, it is to disrupt and dismantle drug trafficking organizations.
Mm-hmm. And talk to us about the organizational structure of that organization.
Through the grant funds, there are specific definitions, and essentially what that amounts to is that there has to be an established leader and at least 4 people that fall underneath that leader, that their entire purpose is to make money from drug trafficking. Mm-hmm.
I know that the organization has a number of partners and that the law enforcement agencies in San Juan County participate, but I also know that we have some federal agencies that are partners with us. They may not be funding partners necessarily, but they are partners in the sense that they have a similar mission, and that is to deal with the drug problems and the gang problems in our community. Tell us who the partners are.
The specific members, the board members are made up of the San Juan County Sheriff's Office, Farmington Police Department, Aztec PD, and Bloomfield PD. We also work very closely with the DA's office and other federal agencies that are located here and in Albuquerque.
And I know that occasionally we have interaction with the FBI. The FBI's jurisdiction in our area is largely on the Navajo reservation. But the FBI partners with our people to some extent. And then we have the Department of Homeland Security that we would consider a partner agency. Immigration and Customs Enforcement also is a federal agency that we deal with on occasion. Talk a little bit about those relationships with those federal agencies. How do we work with them?
We have a program that was started by the United States Attorney's Office, and it is called Worst of the Worst. So what that does is that allows us to route these cases where a person has a stronger or a bigger criminal background, and we're able to get these federal agencies to pick those up, to adopt those cases, to get those people out of our community.
I want you to focus a little bit more on the funding mechanisms for operations that are conducted by the task force. I assume that the member entities each contribute something towards funding and probably towards manpower as well. But let's focus on funding. How do we get the money that it takes to operate this task force?
Each of the police departments and the sheriff's office contribute funding, operational funding. In addition to that, we have 2 major grant funds. One is the Justice Assistance Grant Fund, we commonly call JAG. The other fund is HIDA, which is from the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Fund, which comes from the White House. And that's our 2 primary funding mechanisms.
What about manpower? Who contributes the manpower to the task force?
Each of the contributing agencies designate manpower to us. Farmington Police Department gives us agents, San Juan County Sheriff's Office gives us agents, Bloomfield, Aztec from time to time is able to give us agents.
Okay. And are you fully staffed at this point in time?
No, we're two people short right now as a result of each of the agencies being shorthanded. It takes, once they get fully staffed and able to put enough guys on the street, men and women on the street to respond to calls, then they allow us to backfill specialty positions.
Just, I think it would be intuitive for people to think that the work that you do and that the members of the task force do is a highly stressful type of work. Provide, if you can, some insight as to the work that's done by the members of the task force and the stress levels that exist for those people.
It is very stressful. The putting these agents into some of the situations that they go into is very difficult. It's very stressful. I think it's more stressful for us that are on the outside than it is for the guys that are actually in the middle of certain projects. But depending on the areas that we go to, that may have an effect on the stress level as well. But inherently, you're correct. It is very stressful, but we take a lot of precautions to make sure that our people are safe and go home at the end of the day.
The nature of the work, in large part, is undercover work, and I would assume, and as a consequence of that, there's probably a high level of use of informants. Can you talk a little bit about how the task force works in gathering information that's helpful to solving these big crime issues?
Typically our cases begin with patrol. Patrol is really our lifeline to the beginning of most of our investigations. These are the men and women that make contact on the street. And their cases get sent to us and we evaluate them, and we're able to carry those cases forward in a number of different ways, whether it be somebody that's willing to give us information or whether we're able to do it from an intelligence standpoint on information that's gained from that initial patrol investigation, whether it be through phones or interviews. That information gets put into some of our federal counterparts' databases, and then we receive that information back and cross-reference that information to carry these cases forward.
Tell us a little bit about the kinds of cases that you're working on or that are typical for the task force to be giving attention to.
So the reality is we don't have enough manpower to investigate everything. So we work with the local agencies to assist us in trying to impact some of those locations. But typically, when we work these investigations and we get to the point where we complete them and we make our arrests and do a takedown, the sad reality is that these organizations and people in nature that are involved in illegal narcotics, those positions are backfilled or spring up in other areas. So once we complete one investigation, our attention has to immediately be turned to another because we've been focusing on one group and another group is flourishing.
I know that the primary focus of the task force is on illegal drugs, probably focusing on dealers primarily. But a related focus is on gang activity as well. And so I think our viewers would probably be interested in knowing, from your perspective as the director of the task force, how would you characterize the level of gang activity in our community in San Juan County or Northwest New Mexico?
It's obviously here the gangs are not as they're more loosely connected than they were in years past, and they will click up or link back up when the need arises. But for the most part, they are still conducting illegal activity under the name of whichever gang that they associate with, and they're still recruiting members. They're a lot more quiet about it than they used to be in years past because they know that it draws attention to them. But they're still prevalent. They're still conducting illegal activity, and we're still focusing on that criminal activity.
How much? What percentage would you estimate would be the focus on gang activity as opposed to drug activity, or are they so interrelated that it's difficult to allocate time to one or the other?
I wouldn't be able to differentiate a percentage between the two. Once we do identify somebody that's involved in gang activity and illegal narcotics, we obviously document that information and utilize it, properly for prosecution.
In the context of drug activity, what kinds of drugs are you focusing on? What are you seeing that is out there that's primarily being used in our community?
Our worst problem continues to be methamphetamine. It comes here, it's extremely cheap right now. It's being manufactured in super labs in Mexico. It comes up obviously across the border, and it floods in here, and it's extremely hard to interdict, but we're doing the best we can with what we've got. It's very addictive, and it's so incredibly sad to see the people that get hooked on it. It's a horrible drug that affects the United States. But we've seen an uptick in heroin. There's a new drug called fentanyl It's been around with medical use for years and years. Now it's being manufactured illegally and coming in on the East Coast. Fentanyl's being mixed with heroin, and we're seeing an uptick in heroin overdoses that fentanyl's been mixed in with the heroin, so it's extremely dangerous.
So fentanyl is an opioid, is that correct?
It is a synthetic opioid drug it's 100 times stronger than morphine, so it's very, very powerful, very powerful.
Now, how are we trending in those with those particular drugs? Are we seeing any decline in the use of any of those drugs or the sale of those drugs in our community, or is it cyclical in some respect?
It is cyclical, and it's cyclical with the individual. An individual may be a traditional methamphetamine user and then require something to bring them down, and then they will turn to the opiate-based medications or heroin, which is an opiate-based illegal narcotic. The problem is that obviously these illegal narcotics are not managed or regulated by any entity, so you never know what's in it, and that's what ends up killing people.
I'm assuming that the workload will never end for the task force, that there's no way to eliminate illegal drug use or dealing of drugs. Gang activity is something that is a social issue that can't be eliminated completely. It's just the nature of human beings, I think, to associate in that way. But we certainly want to think that we can make a difference and that we can impact it in some way for the benefit of our community. How would you assess the work of the task force in accomplishing some of those positive results?
We are extremely thankful and happy when we're able to get, whether it be through the criminal justice system or whether it be, holding somebody's feet to the fire in other ways to get them out of that lifestyle. It's very rewarding, and my team, we go to work in roundtable projects every day in the hopes that we're going to affect the community and somebody's lives in a positive manner. Every report that comes across my desk, it's very sad to see that there are new people coming in contact and becoming addicted to narcotics. And so we're going to work every day to try to make sure and try to keep it off the streets as best we can to keep people from getting hooked on it.
The task force has been responsible for some fairly high-profile takedowns of drug dealers in our community. Are there any in particular that you could talk about as an example to our viewers?
The one that I'm most familiar with is obviously since my tenure with Region 2 Narcotics was our takedown, in which we worked in conjunction with Homeland Security, FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, of the 8 individuals that were indicted, which some of them operated on the reservation. And so we were very proud of that project. Again, that was very effective and shut that DTO down, that drug trafficking organization down. But while we were focusing on that, again, other groups were gaining power and strongholds in other parts of the county, which we are now working on.
Kevin, I want to thank you for the work that you do, and if you would, from me, extend to those other folks who work on the task force our appreciation for their effort. It is a high-stress job, but it's one that's very important to be done in our community. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close this segment?
We're thankful for your support, and we're thankful for our community's support. We couldn't do it without the support of our community.
Thanks again for being here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all for joining us this morning on the Mayor's Table, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next Monday.